Well, it looks like that Toad Town is causing havoc, which means about the fact that the music itself has been changed, so you know what that means? There's gonna be some more mischiefs involved, which means about the fact that there's gonna be a plentiful of Shy Guys to worry about. So as a result, yeah, we definitely need to able to investigate of what the cause of the forms of Shy Guys to appear, and not to mention though, they somehow stole one of these items, for I've heard. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I, the one and only, Mexi here once again, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of Paper Mario, aka for those of you who live in Japan, Mario Story for the Nintendo 64. So, last time, we essentially did manage to fully complete Chapter 3 by going into the forms of Windy Mill to able to find out the true weakness in terms of the forms of Topper Blopper, which, actually as it turns out, it was actually his heart. And as a result though, speaking of which, when it comes to Topper Blopper, we did indeed manage to able to kick his butt, especially all thanks to the forms of how the fact that his heart was actually inside of him. So because of that though, and relatively speaking though, we did manage to take him down very quickly because Topper Blopper only has 10 HP, and as a result, despite the fact that we only got hit once, but that's okay, because we did somehow manage to able to thrash him at the end. So, in addition to that, we also did manage to able to realize about the fact that we somehow rescued the third Star Spirit by the forms of Scala. So as a result though, based off from Super Duel Mode's host from the likes of Mario Party 5, which you probably already know what I'm talking about, so I digress. In addition to that, we also did manage to able to went into the next Peaches segment, which thankfully though, it's not that very long though, especially noticeable about the fact that it really doesn't matter what specific answers you go for, in terms of Bowser's questions with all that, what Mario's weaknesses is all about, and in addition to that, we also did manage to able to went back into the Forever Forest, but actually as it turns out is about the fact that we did somehow manage to able to bump into Junior Trooper ever since in Chapter 1, so relatively speaking though, he's actually going to be a little bit more tougher than he forms of how it does it since the second time around. So because of that though, but we still managed to able to beat him regardless and all that stuff. So yeah, that's what I can really say about that. About that, I guess. So anyways though, so today for this video is that originally though, I was assuming about the fact that we're trying to focusing on the next chapter, which appears to be chapter 4, but I need to do some other things first before we're able to actually get to it with chapter 4. Like, for example, as you can see, we somehow managed able to return back into Marlin's house ever since in Journey forms within chapter 1, and as you can tell, we actually got ourselves a mysterious badge, which, as a result, to do that though, that's how the spin jump comes into play, where basically though, if you're trying to able to pull off a ground pound for about 3 times, that way you can get yourselves, without a doubt, as the uniquest badge in the entire game. Same applies with the forms of the 1,000-year door as well, mind you. That's what appears to be quick change. Basically, what this badge can do is that this allows you to able to change all these partners on the fly while during the forms of your specific turn. And that particular badge right there is a godsend, especially noticeable because no matter what though, if you get into some situations like tougher battles for instance, that particular badge will be useful, especially because despite the fact that, well, as far as I'm aware, we do need roughly 4 badge points in order to able to actually equip it. So because of this though, yeah, I still need to able to keep on selecting badge points in terms of, you know, trying to level up and stuff like that. So relatively speaking, it was about the fact, as a matter of fact, about the fact that we've almost nearly at the end. In terms of the forms of trying to able to reach our maximum capacity, we're able to try to reach our 30 badge points in terms of the forms of this game. Unlike the forms of how it does it on the 1,000-year door, you can just simply reach up to it for about a maximum of 99 badge points, for I've heard anyway, because obviously those about the fact that, well, you can able to actually reach up to maximum potential in regards to the forms of the 1,000-year door's leveling up system. So I digress. So as you can tell, for the fact that we're actually going to be able to actually go back into the previous locations, because as far as I'm aware, now we've actually got ourselves our spin jump in our hands. So this means about the fact that it's now time to able to hunt down some of these missing star pieces. So, for instance though, as you saw, whenever we did manage to able to pull off a ground pound, that actually signifies, as you can tell, that one of the tiles is actually shaking a bit. So as a result, if you go near towards the falls that particular tile, that actually signifies that the star piece was actually located. So because of that though, yeah, I will try my best able to actually try to find every single one of those star pieces well hidden during the forms of some location. So as a result though, however though, I was assuming for the fact that we'll try to able to actually hunt down for more of those star pieces somewhere in Boo's mansion, but I might as well save that for later time, because no matter what though, that I don't suppose we're probably not going to go into the forms of well, Toad Town tunnels anytime soon, because as you can tell, that basically though, every time whenever you do manage to able to win back into the previous chapters, like for instance though, we're about to be approaching all the way back to the Goomba village, if you couldn't tell already, as you can tell, that I've somehow managed to immediately equip the first attack badge, and basically what that does, this will allow you to able to skip the entire battle sequence if you do somehow manage to able to pull off a first strike on weaker enemies, like for instance regular Goombas, spiked Goombas, and etc, and this also applies with chapter 1 stuff as well, which means about the fact that at this point in time we are basically overpowered for the sake of the forms of, you know, trying to revisiting through not only the previous areas based off from previous chapters, ranging from the prologue with the forms of the Goomba village, in addition to the forms of the Koopa village from chapter 1, and in addition to that with the Scorching Desert, or specifically Mount Wreckit, and in addition to Dry Desert as well, during the forms of in chapter 2. So as a result though, yeah, you get the idea for this point. So as you can tell, yes, it is red and white, based off for the sake of the forms of one of those questions mentions about Goomba King. So as a result though, the good thing about that is that we've already fight him. So anyway though, so few things I want to talk about this is though, and that's what it appears to be for the fact that, well, today's date of course here is the 10th of April today, in some cases in 2025 today, so no matter what though, it's about the fact that at this point in time, that usually relatively speaking, we've only got about 4 more days to go until Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the movie, is going to be releasing on DVD, Blu-ray, and UHD for the sake of Ultra HD Blu-ray for the likes of the UK version. So still, we haven't got that long now until the actual film finally comes out on physical media. So because of that though, yeah, I'm still incredibly excited for it. So because of that though, just for the sake of rewatching that film time and time again, and eventually at some point during the forms of around in summertime, then obviously though I can able to try to rewatch Tiny Toon Adventures, How I Spend My Vacation during the forms of in the summer season, because it reminds me of so much of experiencing the summer vacation, and on top of that, having fun trip outs and all that stuff, which, let's face it though, because obviously that particular film is actually really popular when it comes to likely for certain choices for like summer-themed movies, alongside with the films of a Goofy movie, and on top of all that stuff though, a lot of stuff you know as well, I guess. So either way, and speaking of a Goofy movie actually, I've noticed is about the fact that a Goofy movie is definitely going to be celebrating its 30th anniversary this year, alongside with the films of Toy Story of course, so as a result, yeah, that particular discussion can't wait though, during at some point in the future, while looking back on during the films have been those two films in particular. In fact, luckily you can still able to actually watch those during the films have been Disney Plus, assuming of course about the fact you do need to subscribe to Disney Plus, so I digress. So anyways, let's get this into it with our continuation discussion all about the forms of, you know exactly what I'm talking about, more discussions about the forms of Nintendo Switch 2, Nintendo Direct, and what was before last time? Oh yeah, about the fact that obviously though Nintendo GameCube games is finally coming to the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack, but only being playable on Nintendo Switch 2, all thanks to the fact that with more capacity, and on top of all that stuff though, we already know for the fact that the first 3 games will be shown up on that particular subscription services, which is of course The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, Soul Calibur 2, and F-Zero GX. So yeah, it's pretty nice about the fact that F-Zero as a franchise itself is actually going to get more representation around here, which is all thanks to the forms of, you know, the most recent installments during that time, which appears to be F-Zero 99 for the Nintendo Switch. Considering for the fact that, you know, F-Zero 99 has recently got a bunch of updates in the past, ever since in June forms of sometime in 2023, so either way, that's besides the point. Now, as far as for my speculations, in terms of the forms of the future games will be added to Nintendo Switch 2, Nintendo GameCube library of games for the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack, well, my speculations for this is about the fact I was really expecting they were trying to able to actually add not only Mario Party 4, but alongside with Mario Party 5, Mario Party 6, as well as Mario Party 7, because as far as I'm aware, that Nintendo Switch 2 did indeed manage to able to have a built-in microphone. So because of that though, I was mainly concerned about the phones of Mario Party 6 and 7, because obviously though, both Mario Party 6 and Mario Party 7 both utilizes the Nintendo GameCube microphone. So no matter what though, I'm not exactly sure that's going to be implemented during the forms of an emulation, as long as about the fact that you can able to actually either turn the mic off or even use as a controller, just like the forms of how it does it on the original hardware. So because of that though, yeah, we'll sure wait and see what happens in due time, and June at some point until likely in 2026 for some time, but then again, we'll have to wait and see. And alongside with that, I was maybe hoping for the fact that Mario Kart Double Dash will be added on there. Alongside with that, there's also going to be, I was hoping for Kirby Air Ride will be featured on there as well, especially that both Mario Kart Double Dash and Kirby Air Ride does manage to feature this unique way to able to experience multiplayer, and that's what appears to be LAN mode, where basically though you need to able to actually access to, back in the day, you need to have multiple Nintendo GameCubes in order to able to actually access to LAN mode, which means about the fact that you can play up to like let's just say in Mario Kart Double Dash, you can play up to 8 players on LAN mode. So no matter what though, it's a bit convoluted to able to try to explain about this particular situation, because when I was younger, I don't understand how that works. But then as soon as when I'm grown older, the more I try to able to actually understand what LAN mode stands for. So I digress. So anyway, and I was really also expecting for the fact that maybe they'll try to add Mario Superstar Baseball on there as well. And on top of that, WarioWare Inc. Mega Party games, because that was obviously a multiplayer version of WarioWare Inc. Minigame Mania with the forms of multiplayer features and all that stuff. And you know, I was still really expecting for the fact that despite the fact that we still haven't exactly got Super Smash Bros. For the Nintendo 64 just yet onto Nintendo Switch, but as far as Switch 2 is concerned, we were really expecting for the fact that Super Smash Bros. Melee might able to actually make it on here. I mean, who knows? I mean, it's just about the fact it's one of those earlier stages at this point in time in regards to the forms of adding some Nintendo GameCube games onto your Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack, but then again, it's only on Switch 2 just because of the forms of more capacity or something like that. So, and speaking of which though, is about the fact that yes, just like the forms of how it does it on the past subscription services ranging from Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo 64, alongside with the honorable mentions with the forms of the Sega Mega Drive / Sega Genesis if you lived in North America. Basically though, we're able to actually get an additional controller specifically for the Nintendo Switch 2. That's of course the glorious Nintendo GameCube controller, which from the looks of all that stuff though, it just looks exactly like the forms of how it does it back in 2001, but now it's all wireless now, just like the forms of how it does it for the GameCube Wavebird, although the color choice they're going for is purple to make things a little bit more iconic for the Nintendo GameCube logo itself. And in addition to that, much like the forms of how it does it for both the Super Nintendo controller, alongside with the forms of the Nintendo 64 controller for the Nintendo Switch Online subscription services, they add some additional buttons here and there as well. Like for instance though, they've now added in the capture button, alongside with the forms of the home button, and on top of that, the I would say the ZL button as far as I'm aware, and also they've somehow added in the C button as well for Switch 2. That's of course, you know exactly what I'm about to say, the chat button. So no matter what though, and as far as the launch day of that particular controller as far as I'm concerned, it's going to be releasing during the exact same time as the phones of not only the Nintendo Switch 2 itself, but alongside with the phones of Mario Kart World, and as far as the actual service as far as I'm aware, usually as far as I can tell, the Nintendo GameCube, or usually calls it Nintendo Classics as far as we do realize, about the fact that it will be releasing during the phones around the exact same day as in Nintendo Switch 2 releases. So, and of course what's even more interesting is about the fact that when it comes to Nintendo Switch 2, they can able to actually access to 7 different selectable games from console to console for the actual subscription services. So, because logically though, in Switch 1, they can only be accessed by 6 of those specific services, like, you know, NES, SNES, and Game Boy/Game Boy Color if you want to count that, and in addition to Game Boy Advance and Nintendo 64 and the Sega Mega Drive/Sega Genesis. So, and meanwhile for Nintendo Switch 2, we're able to actually access to 7 different apps. So, in fact, it actually kind of reminds me like a similar amount as the phones of the Wii U, where basically though, in terms of the Wii U system, they obviously do able to actually access to 7 different systems based off of the likes of the Virtual Console lineup. Like, for instance, though, they're able to actually have Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo 64, Game Boy Advance, and in addition to other systems which was never been addressed for the Switch or Switch 2, and relatively speaking, it was about the fact that those 3 remaining ones that are still stuck onto the Wii U, despite the fact that you can no longer get those games now, because, you know, the eShop is dead still, especially because, you know, there is no way for you to able to actually buy more Virtual Console games anymore, which just sucks honestly, because no matter what though, we somehow moved on to forced paid subscription services now. I mean, let's face it though, it's about the fact that everything else around the forms of gaming community is about to change and join at some point in the future. So that's what usually happens sometimes, I'm afraid. So I digress. So, because usually on the Wii U though, they have obviously also access to not only TurboGrafx 16, but alongside with the forms of Nintendo DS and Nintendo Wii, for the sake of the forms of trying to play Wii games digitally without needing to worry about the forms of the discs are reading. So because of that though, yeah, it seems kind of weird about the fact that the Wii U itself seems able to ignore the Sega platform in terms of the forms of Virtual Console lineup, whilst compared to the Wii, and nowadays with Switch, or Switch 2 to be more specifically, they've now added in the Sega Mega Drive lineup of games. So, but I'm still really expecting they might be able to try to include the Sega Saturn games or the Sega Dreamcast games, because if it does add it in some the Sega Dreamcast games, oh man, we can able to expect to finally tackle through the Sega Dreamcast counterparts of both Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 if we feel like it, because still, no matter what though, my Sega Dreamcast is still suffering the phone's that stupid random resetting problem again, which is to be expected, because obviously though is about the fact it does have its age, but either way. Now, I really don't know if it's possible about the fact that if Sonic Shuffle might able to make an appearance on the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack for Nintendo Switch 2, if the phone's the Sega Dreamcast application will be up. I mean, time will tell though, especially because they only going to be focusing on Nintendo kind of stuff like that, so, but I digress. So, anyways, let's move on to the next thing they did somehow revealed for that particular recent Direct, and that's what it appears to be, for the fact that, yes, apparently though, that Deltarune is also going to be making its way to Nintendo Switch 2, not only for the sake of trying to able to actually add it in 1 chapter, but not 2, not 3, but 4 chapters during the forms of the actual game's progress, as far as I'm aware. So yeah, that's actually quite interesting, all things considered. And as far as I'm aware, I believe that particular thing is about to be releasing also during the forms of on launch day for the Nintendo Switch 2. So yeah, I guess that's that thing. And meanwhile, we've also got Borderlands 4 is now making its way to Nintendo Switch 2. So yeah, that's sure it's something. So yeah, kudos to able to actually have that particular version, so that way you can play the game on the go. And next up we have is certain updates for the sake of the forms of 2K. Like for instance though, Civilization 7 is also going to be releasing for the Nintendo Switch 2. So, but this time around though, they've now added in the mouse support. So that way you can now able to actually guarantee to able to actually just try to able to like maneuver around the menus much more easier now, especially it almost reminds you like you playing for the game on PC or something like that. So relatively speaking though, everything else checks out there. And as far as 2K Company, as far as I'm aware, they did somehow address a couple of games will be coming to Nintendo Switch 2, like WWE 2K, and on top of that, there's also going to be NBA 2K, and I believe both of those specific games in particular will add like new installments or something like that. I mean, who knows, who knows. So after that though, they've shown us the forms of some more gameplay footage of the next game in the lineup, which appears to be Survival Kits, so interesting for sure. And next up we have is Enter the Gungeon 2. It's going to be coming to Nintendo Switch 2, so yeah, that's sure it's something. And on top of that, we also got Star Seeker Astronaut Expeditions, I think that's what it says anyway. So yeah, that's what I can really say about this title, I guess. And next up we have is Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition. It's going to be coming to Nintendo Switch 2. So at the very least, it's pretty cool about the fact that the actual game itself runs quite well on Nintendo Switch 2 for what I've seen so far, in terms of the forms of the gameplay footage alike. And what's even more cooler than that is that, at the very least though, that game usually, well, if you're trying to go after the game in full, physical game, that basically though, it does not require the stupid game key card or anything else like that. So at the very least, that's something. So, and next up we have is the, a critically acclaimed Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate. So at the very least, I'm very, very pleased that this game finally comes to Nintendo Switch 2. And for what I've seen the gameplay footage running on Switch 2, it still looks really, really good. Even though despite the fact it only runs at 30 FPS as opposed to 60, unlike the defaults of how it does it at PlayStation 5 Pro. But that's okay, because I'm very curious to check that game out. Assuming about the fact that if it does say game card key, obviously though, unfortunately though, I'm probably not going to get it, unless if I was trying to get it digitally, if that might be the only option I can probably think about. So, but we shall see what happens, especially no matter what though, that Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate hasn't been confirmed the release date yet for Nintendo Switch 2 version, so I think my guess it will be coming out during let's just say until 2026 or something like that, or perhaps even maybe 2027 for able to try to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the original game's release back on the PlayStation days in 1997. So maybe that'll be the catch to that though. I'm not entirely 100% sure on that one, but then again, we'll have to wait and see what happens. So as you can see, I managed able to get myself my glorious Power Plus badge, which allows me to able to increase my strength by 1. But here's the catch to this though. I do need whopping 6 of those badge points in order to able to equip the Power Plus badge. So because of that though, yeah, it's pretty insane amount, as long as about the fact that we do have to, again, occasionally try to able to switch over to, you know what I'm talking about, equipped badges or unequipped badges every once in a while, in case that there are some situations for some battles. So because of that though, yeah, it does take a bit of some time to try to get used to. Unlike in A Thousand Year Door, you can able to actually equip the insane amount of badges as much as you want. So, because maximum capacity for badge points in A Thousand Year Door is 99. So, at least that's something. So, anyway, next up, in terms of the forms of, the highlights for Nintendo Switch 2 Nintendo Direct is, of course, a montage of the forms of more Nintendo Switch 2 games is going to be on its way. Like, for example, there's the forms of, Kirasu Gummi Path of the Goddess. That's going to be on launch day for sure. And next up, we also have Hollow Knight Silksong. So yeah, it's about time to able to actually finally get a chance to see that game in action after so many countless amount of delays, and also same applies with the phones, that particular absence of news, informations, and all that stuff. And we're really hoping about the fact that that game will be releasing due time, and as far as I'm aware, that game is now being confirmed for Nintendo Switch 2 release. And it did say on the actual date schedule, as far as I'm aware, it did say 2025 for sure, because no matter what though, hopefully we'll hear more about that game at some point in the future, so I digress. So, anyway, and after that, what appears to be Story of Seasons, Grand Bazaar. I believe that game is also going to be on launch day or something like that, which I can't really tell for sure, but I'll explain more about that later. So either way, oh geez, we got spotted by a unexpected Shy Guy, which, yeah, that's what happens right there if you manage to able to get spotted by a Shy Guy. Basically though, that particular Shy Guy just runs away, and as a result, there is no way to able to progress onwards, unless if you use Bow on a specific house right there, and if you try to hide yourself, like for instance any other spot in particular, basically if you wait for a while, the Shy Guy will come back again, but now he actually decides to sing along. So because of that though, all it really shows is just music notes, and that's all there is to it. But then, he actually enters through the door unexpectedly from that wall, which means that that way we'll find out about the fact that we can now open up this particular wall door, which pretty much leads us to this very unexpected box, which as a result, according to the Phones That specific articles, it did say for the fact that it's a toy box. So yeah, something tells me about the fact I need to hop onto the spring, and as a result, if we do land on the spring, it will lead us to the next world. So Chapter 4, Trials of the Toy Box. Or Trials in the Toy Box, I should say. So yeah, this place is going to be filled to the brim with a lot of Shy Guys in this place, so here we are. It's this very cool, unique level theme right here, which does manage to take place in the actual toy box itself. In fact, kind of thinking about it though, this place reminds me of so much of the Funhouse world from the likes of Pac-Man world, except the fact that there aren't any clowns anywhere. So as you can tell, the main gimmick about this particular chapter right here is that we have to utilize the train station. But here's the catch, we can't go any further than that, because obviously though, the train is missing, so we need to figure something out until we're able to actually decide to progress. So because of that though, for the time being though, we can only stick around in the blue station for now on, because yes, I say the blue station because the actual station itself does contain not one, but 4 stations we can able to actually traverse into. There's the blue one, as I mentioned earlier, and there's also the pink station, the green station, and finally the red station. So because of that though, something tells me we have to investigate through all 4 of those stations as much as possible. So because of that though, so yeah, let's go and take on the those Shy Guys. So their max HP was 7, attack power is 2, and defense power is 0. So I believe they do have multiple color variations, so it really doesn't matter what specific color you might come across into while tattle at the same time. So it may look like about the fact that when it comes to like if we come across into not only yellow Shy Guys, but as well as the red Shy Guys and green Shy Guys especially, and maybe blue ones as well, they all have the exact same amount of HP, within 7 HP, and of course attack power is 2, and defense power is 0, obviously. So either way, and I totally forgot about the forms of this acrobatic movesets they somehow performed, but either way. But I'm sure enough that we can easily take these guys down, no problem, especially because we've already equipped not only Quick Change, but also the Power Plus badge as well. So because of that though, totally appreciate about that. So anyway, as I was saying, for the fact that, yes, as I mentioned this before, that Story of Seasons Grand Bazaar Nintendo Switch 2 edition is going to be on its way, and I believe it's not going to be on launch day or anything, so instead it's going to be releasing during the exact same time as in Switch 1 release, during at some point on the 27th of August in 2025. So, and after that, which appears to be Buddy Forms of Good Night Universe, that game is going to be releasing during at some point in this year in 2025. So, and there's also 2 Point Museum. That game is also going to be releasing in 2025. And there's also the forms of Wild Hearts S. I believe that game is going to be releasing during at some point on the 25th of July in 2025. So, yeah, we haven't got that long of it, do we? So, anyway, max HP is 7, attack power is 2, and defense power is 0, by the forms of Groove guys. So, yeah, they almost reminds me of the forms of one of those outfits for, like, clown fests, or, to be more accurate though, almost like, reminds me of so much of the forms of that, the Hunchback of Notre Dame vibes, or something like that. So, which I already know for the fact it has been about a couple of hours since I actually have last played this game for sure, but as you can see, we actually did manage to use, without a doubt, is the best star power in the entire game, at least to me anyway. That's what appears to be the Star Storm. And what that does, it functions kind of the same way as the forms of the regular Shooting Star item, where basically that is about the fact that if you use the Shooting Star normally, it actually takes the amount of damage up to like 6 damage when it comes to if you try to focusing on all of the enemies. Well, in during the forms of in Star Storm move, it actually decided able to increase by 1, and as a result, it deals 7 damage. So as a result, that's actually pretty good star power indeed. But if you couldn't tell already, we actually did manage to use, let's just say, 2 star energy points. So because of that though, unlike the previous 2 star powers, it actually costs 1 power per use, whilst in the forms of in Star Storm, and eventually the later star powers to come, the actual usage of that is about to increase by, like, let's just say, like 1, and maybe potentially with the 5th Star Spirits that we will come across into at some point, that it actually costs for about 3 star power points, I'm pretty sure. So because of that though, yeah, we'll have to stay tuned for that at some point. So, next up we have is Witchbrook, which, speak for itself, is going to be coming in during at some point in winter 2025. And also, unexpectedly, we're about to be getting Puyo Puyo Tetris 2S, and I believe that game is going to be a launch title for the Nintendo Switch 2. So yeah, that's something. And in addition to that, there's also the forms of, well, as far as I'm aware, about the fact that, despite the fact I don't usually focus on, oh wow, we got very lucky during that time, especially we've almost gonna get smacked by, a regular Shy Guy as far as we do realize. So, anyway, next up we have is Rome Factory Guardians of Ansma, Nintendo Switch 2 edition. I believe that game is gonna be on, launch day for sure. And meanwhile, there's also Marvel Cosmic Invasion. That game is going to be releasing at some point in winter 2025 as well. So, logically though, is about the fact that we can expect able to see the majority of those Switch 2 games to be releasing throughout in 2025, and possibly for next year as well, for 2026 if possible. So, and next up we have is Star Wars Outlaws. That game is now going to be releasing for Nintendo Switch 2 at some point also in 2025. But unfortunately though, about the fact that Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball Sparking Zero has not made it to the actual upcoming games for Nintendo Switch 2, sadly. Maybe they will do at some point in the future. I'm not entirely 100% sure on that one, but we shall see what happens in due time, because I was so desperately able to experience the game for myself, especially I can play the game on the go. But unfortunately though, beggars can't be choosers, I guess. But then again, it's early stages at this point in time for Nintendo Switch 2, but I digress. So, I can go more and more when it comes to the forms of the last few batch of informations that we somehow expect for Nintendo Switch 2 things, but we'll have to save more discussions about that particular topic until for tomorrow, because let's face it though, as you can tell, I'm almost running out of room for my item storage at the moment right now, so we'll just go ahead and head back for a bit. And you do also realize there's actually an optional boss fight right here, which we'll get to him and doing at some point later on. Because, well, suffice to say, I think we should probably end things off at this point right here. So join me next time for more of Let's Play of Paper Mario for the Nintendo 64. Is that we're about to be going back into Toad Town for a bit to try to find the toy train. And on top of that, we can able to continue exploring through Chapter 4 in the toy box. So I'll see you guys until tomorrow. Later, fellas.